that how you basically set it?
Okay, I think we're going to get started in a minute, everyone. Thank you for joining our panel today. This is Empowering Trans Youth Comprehensive Services for Care. I'm Ash, which you may remember from the other room. And I'm joined by some really, really lovely people who are doing some extraordinary work in the Twin Cities. Representatives from Avenues for Youth and Rainbow Health, respectively. If y'all want to introduce yourselves, and we can move this down the line there.
Hi, y'all. My name is Ryan. I use he, him pronouns. I work at Avenues for Youth and manage the ConneQT Host Home Program.
Hello, my name is I'm Ezra. I use he, him pronouns, and I am the case manager for ConneQT. I work with Ryan.
And my name, it's so weird. My name is Arielle Johnson. I also go by AJ, they, she pronouns. I'm a psychotherapist at Rainbow Health, and I'm a newly licensed independent clinical social worker. Thank you.
So I guess we'll start easy and we'll just have everyone briefly describe the services your organizations provide to support young trans non-binary people. I know we kind of want to make a distinction in who we serve. What does youth mean? What were you helping out?
Yeah, so Avenues, I kind of feel weird behind this one. We'll stand up for a second. Avenues for Youth has been around since the 95, I believe. And it was started by a young woman who had experienced homelessness herself and recognized there was a lack of youth-specific services. So we have two shelters, one in North Minneapolis and one in Brooklyn Park. And then we have two community-based programs, ConneQT being one of them, and then a young families program as well. We work with young folks ages 16 to 24 who are experiencing housing instability or homelessness. ConneQT as a program started in 1997. And it was really a community-based response to LGBTQI youth homelessness, where folks in the community were recognizing that there were a lack of culturally responsive supports for queer and trans youth, and that most youth that were entering into shelters who were queer or trans would prefer to sleep on the streets than utilize those services due to discrimination, harassment, and violence based off of their sexual orientation or gender identity. So the community came together and said, what can we do? And the ConneQT Host Home Program, which was called the GLBT Host Home Program, was born in '97. Is really looking through the lens of solidarity with youth rather than charity. That's the quick overview.
Yeah, I don't have anything else to add to that. I just wanted to say too, the other thing I might be speaking on is that I've done a bunch of housing work in like community organizing spaces for a long time, mostly with like intentional communities and mutual aid networks, and I think that that is like a huge part of how I support trans homelessness as well.
At Rainbow Health, we have a brand new pilot program. It's called Free to Be, and it's our adolescent and emerging adult program. So the program serves folks ages 14 to 25. And we offer both mental health therapy and case management services. So one of the cool things about the program is that it specifically serves folks who identify as LGBTQIA and or BIPOC. So anybody who fits in either of those categories and is between the ages of 14 to 25 qualifies. So we offer long-term individual therapy, as well as case management services that can provide care packages with essentials like socks, underwear, toiletries, and gender-based hygiene products, security and utility deposit assistance, bridging application and delivery fees. So Bridging is an organization that provides basically like housing, furniture, yeah, like anything you would need to move into your first apartment. So if you're a part of our program, we will pay for the full $200 that it normally costs to apply for those services. And then we also will pay for the $80 delivery fee. In addition to those services, we also provide tuck panties and binders, safer sex kits, naloxone nasal spray with training included, unlimited Metro Go cards for folks who are wanting to get a job and don't have transportation. So basically, we provide those Go cards for the first, I think it's 2 to 3 months, where folks might be interviewing, and it's basically meant to provide them that access so that then once they start having a paycheck, they can pay for their own transportation. And then we also provide cell phones for folks where it might be where tech might be inaccessible. So if folks are out of state, I forgot to mention that we do so this serves youth all throughout the state of Minnesota. And so if folks don't have the ability to connect with a telehealth therapist or case manager, we can actually send them a cell phone for free. So it's kind of a lot. Thanks for sticking with me through that.
Yeah, no, that new program sounds really exciting and
Yeah.
it's like so comprehensive. Thank you all. On the mental health note, how do you prioritize mental health well-being of trans folks? And when I say trans, just like David earlier, I mean that as an umbrella term when we're talking about non-binary, gender expansive, anyone outside of the gender binary. How do you prioritize their mental health and well-being in your programs and services, particularly in the face of discrimination, stigma, violence, trauma, what have you?
So yeah, I mean, a few things. I think like the first thing I think of is like preventative, right? To make sure that they already have something set up to support them. So yeah, so that might look like in my job, like helping someone get healthcare so that they can get a therapist, or yeah, just get a therapist. And then also like daily, yeah, it's about like relationship, right? And just making sure that I'm like checking in about those things. And normally I do hear like when something transphobic happens to one of the youth I work with, like they normally share that with me or they often share that with me. And I'm able to take some time and be with that person and like help yeah, talk about that and break that down. But yeah, I think like the biggest thing is like having like networks of support, right? Like not just specifically for your mental health, but like therapists, et cetera, but also just like helping this young person get connected into the community, getting connected with all the services that they need. It's hard when like somebody's homeless because like, right, like that, like shelter impacts your mental health so much. And I think I like sometimes, you know, someone's going through crazy stuff and they like just don't have shelter. And, you know, if they had a safe place to be, like that would minimize the transphobia in their life, like so much. And so, yeah, it's just helping this person find stability and, yeah, building safety nets.
Yeah, just to add on a little bit to what Ezra was talking about, you know, with Connect, because we are working with youth that are experiencing housing instability and home. Is this flickering in and out? My voice? You're good?
It sounds right.
Okay. To me, it sounds like it's flickering in and out. Yeah. Okay, thank you. So centering this all is crucial, right? With young folks who are experiencing housing instability and homelessness. And so one of our first conversations with young folks is around how we can support them in that. As Ezra mentioned, access to transportation can be a huge barrier in order to get young people to therapy sessions. So having telehealth as an option is incredibly important for a lot of young folks. Also, you know, ensuring that the provider is culturally responsive to a young person. So we've heard from so many young folks who've come to us who've said, I don't want to go to therapy because I always have to educate my therapist about who I am. Right? And so it becomes another barrier. Also, maybe with certain therapists who aren't culturally responsive, that they're asking really invasive questions that can you know, be re-traumatizing to a young person. So ensuring that the provider, right, is you know, like Rainbow Health or Reclaim, knowing that there are providers out there that can provide that really comprehensive and culturally responsive support is super important.
Yeah. Oh my God. Having to explain your identity to a therapist, like you should get paid for that, you know? Educating them, it's ridiculous. Yeah, a big part of how I approach this work is getting to know the clients where they're at, getting to know who they are, what's important to them, what their home environment is like, who they have in their network, who's kind of like on their team, and who do we have to be very careful and boundary around. And so I really start with, who are you? What are you about? What do you love? What like grinds your gears? And then move into, where are you in your transition? What kind of support do you need? You know, writing letters for folks for surgery, helping them navigate getting on HRT. And oftentimes, one of the things I love is working with folks who are starting HRT and feeling the changes and starting to notice stuff, and then also like frustrated that it's not faster. And you know, so really it's just about meeting them where they're at. And for some folks they're already years in, and for some people they're like, I really want to start my transition, but I don't know how or where, and I'm scared. And so basically just being able to show up and then connect them to the resources that are relevant to where they're at. And as you said, to then process all the homophobic and transphobic shit that happens, and to be there along the way. So I don't know, it's hard to capture in a few sentences because it is so specific to each individual, but I really think about it just in terms of like, where are they when we begin, where do they want to go, and trying to make sure that it's as client-led as possible.
Yeah, and can I add to that? Yeah, I think like focusing on any gender care that person wants is huge, 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 huge. And like, I'm trying to prioritize that as much as that person wants to. And it was, yeah, there's like a lot of barriers still, even though like, you know, we're in Minnesota and we have a lot of amazing surgeons and doctors. And also like sometimes I get nervous when one of my young people already has like a surgeon picked out and it's someone I haven't heard of, and I'm like, with you, like, so that's happened, and we've had like some transphobic people, like, and I'm like, you do not want them to give you new movies, girl. Like, don't do that. We're gonna figure something else out. But like, definitely, yeah, that is huge, huge, huge.
Yeah, I think the barriers of experiencing housing disability, not knowing where your next meal is coming from, where you're gonna lie your head, on top of like trying to just be your authentic self in this world, and as a young person grappling with, you know, what adolescents have to grapple with, on top of then also aligning your gender, right, with who you know yourself to be. So I think part of our work too is to help kind of work on the stabilization piece so that they can focus on themselves, they can focus on their dreams, they can focus on working with a professional to really unpack, you know, the damage of living in a world that is trying to erase you.
That's a lot. Like, that's so real. And I guess my next question is this something you touched upon a little bit earlier, Ryan, is even further is breaking down like the intersectionality when identities become racialized as well, and how that impacts service, particularly in the Twin Cities, which we have a lot of really great services available, but like even all of us up here, we're white. So when you are dealing with young trans folks and young trans folks experiencing houselessness who are from a racialized minority, how does that impact access to care and provision of services for them?
Yeah, that is the question. So I think with Connect, so we have a long history, right? So what predates me, you know, starting in '97, I think a lot of the work was really done around, so young people who experience homelessness that are queer and trans identified, about 60 to 70% have experienced some form of family rejection, right? I think the Trevor Project just came out with a stat recently that said less than 1 in 3 trans youth come from homes, right? So there is that piece. What we've learned over time with ConneQT is when we focus too much on it, so that's a very real, right, for a lot of young folks, but it's not the whole story for everyone. You have to look at intersectional identities as much as possible as well. And I think that's something that a lot of queer organizations, there's been a learning curve, right? And so how do we decentralize this in these conversations and to assure that youth are getting the supports and services that they need? So part of our work is to, yes, talk about that real and painful truth of family rejection. And we need to be talking about intersectional identities and what brings other young folks to Ezra and I. So it may be that mom has been working 3 jobs and poverty is criminalized in this country, right? It could be that that's been detained or deported. That's a more complicated narrative for a young person to bring to us because they know, right, that unintentionally over time, historically, there's been a hierarchy of who deserves support, who doesn't. It's a lot easier for folks. I mean, it's not an easy truth, but it's easier to receive the dominant narrative of family rejection rather than a complicated narrative of like how racial and economic injustice also impacts young people's lives. So looking at young people holistically, and so they can bring their full selves to that experience and that conversation is incredibly important. And that allows us to shape our responses, right, to ensure that young people are getting access to the supports that they need. But there are barriers. There are the systemic barriers on top of that, recognizing that BIPOC, trans, and queer youth are getting hit doubly hard with discrimination around housing, employment, and education. And so part of our work is to advocate for those young people in those systems and push against those barriers as much as possible.
That's amazing. That's encouraging to hear. And yeah, to be honest, I feel like this is a real, I think we all know this is a real issue. And Rainbow Health does a great job serving queer and trans folks, but we are a mostly white organization and we could really benefit from having more folks of color on staff, specifically in our behavioral health clinic. And we do have some, but we are still majority white. And I don't know what the stats look like in terms of demographics of the folks we serve. But
it's
oh,
I'm Val Ward, I'm the grant writer for Rainbow Health. About 2/3 of the clients that we serve are certified BIPOC. Nearly half of our staff do, so we do okay, but we could be doing better to match our demographics. The majority of our staff are also LGBTQ.
oh yeah, like pretty much all of us, which is amazing. So yeah, having providers who look like you, who understand what you've been through, obviously very important. And I will say just the field in general is very white. It leans very white, very like cis woman, and we need to make programs more affordable and more accessible to more people. So I think the barriers aren't just right at the organizational level. I mean, this starts at the very beginning. And if you look at like the U of M, that's where I got my social work degree. Most of the students were white and coming from middle class, if not affluent backgrounds. So yeah, I think it's all the wider next to.
Yeah, it's all definitely systemic. There's a question up front.
Yeah, no, question and comment. You know, I'm surprised to hear that there's still a lot of therapists around that have to be trained. I mean, I've been seeking therapy now for 23 years. I never had a problem to find a provider that was at least somewhat familiar with trans and gender non-conforming people. So, I mean, for you, if you work or if you try to find a provider for one of the youth, how hard it is for you to find one. I mean, as I said, for me, it's not. And I have to say, I also volunteered for Reclaim Reclaim is pretty,
Yeah.
pretty diverse.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think the difficulty is, so a lot of young people may not know how to do that research on their own. And so they may come to us and say, oh, I've been a social worker attached this therapist to me, right? And so oftentimes they haven't done maybe that social worker hasn't done their due diligence to ensure that it's a culturally responsive provider. But I've gone to speak at different schools that provide graduate degrees in mental health, and you'd be surprised at the dearth of education. There may be like a segment on gender and sexual orientation that's like 15 minutes long, right? So the questions that were coming to me were pretty 101, and you could see just like the panic in the students' eyes, like, I want to be prepared for a young person coming in. Where do I find this information and knowledge? So it's not necessarily being taught in the course, like I'm sure they can do like elective work, and I'm sure there's certain programs that are really focused on that and ensuring that, but not across the board. So part of our work is to ensure that we have a ton of partners throughout the community who are culturally responsive, and we know how to get those connected. But there's also a lot of waiting lists because there's so many young folks who are in need of this support, and there's just so few practitioners who are available.
Yeah, and I think that this is a big place where intersectionality comes in, right? Because like, yeah, I'm transgender, and I'm white, and some young people didn't want to work with me at first when I took this position, and that's like so fair, and I think it's so fair to like want someone who looks like you and who shares more of your experiences, yeah, so I think like, even if we find a good surgeon, maybe like I had a situation where, yeah, maybe they were fine, but they like had a lot of like classism and ableism towards my client, and they like denied her care because of her mental health. It was like this weird thing. And it's like we need people who are well-rounded and yeah, who have many shared experiences, not just, because yeah, it's one thing to not know about gender care, and there are so many other pieces of someone's identity that would be nice to have people connect with you about.
I will just say, and then I'll get to the question. That we do not have a wait list currently for our new emerging adult and adolescent program. So like, please send anybody 14 to 25 our way. We are so excited to work with folks and keep building the program. Oh, and yes, it is so hard to know where to look. And I will say, Psychology Today, if you just type in like queer, trans, like kink, allied, sex positive, you can use so many search terms now to find therapists that do have more of a background in these things. And there's also the LGBTQ plus therapist network. So, but yeah, like if I was a teenager, I wouldn't know that. If I wasn't in the field, I wouldn't know that. So I think there's more and more access and understanding, but I think I'm really happy to hear that you've been able to find that and haven't had an issue.
Yeah, and I go to high schools, talk to them. Wonderful. So I like to be informed, and I like to know, have you waiting lists or not?
Yeah.
And that's why I'm here.
Wonderful. Oh, and thanks for the shout out to Reclaim. They're like another really important voice in this work.
Yeah, so I think I'll try and speak up. I think going off what you were saying about accessing truly affirming mental health care, in particular, therapists. In the similar vein, this conversation about how many providers are like cis white women. Speaking as, I'm not a provider, but as a cis woman, like you see it frequently. And I think what you end up seeing a lot is like providers who really strongly identify as allies, but really don't have very much like formal exposure to how to communicate with trans or gender diverse people, especially if they're younger. Like you're stacking these identities. So I'm wondering, like, as like when you're providing support to a patient in accessing healthcare services, whether that's behavioral health, surgery, whatever, like, do you feel like there's any responsibility to like to introduce or like gently challenge providers while you're having like you know, attending an appointment with a young client who's considering surgery or something, any other circumstance like that? Like, what's the responsibility of us as professionals who may have more you are maybe less vulnerable to do some of the pushing on behalf of clients and patients, or is that not our place?
That's our place.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as advocates for young folks, yeah, I would say that's definitely what we do. You know, we're dealing with a situation currently where it's like, okay, I can talk to some state representatives about that piece, or we can, you know, we roll up our sleeves and try to do that work, because a young person is, like I said, dealing with so many other issues. That the frustration of coming up against that system is overwhelming, and that's part of what Ezra's work is with young folks, is to really sit with them in that discomfort, process through that and validate it. And then part of my work is to then, you know, take what Ezra's giving me and then advocate for change in that. I mean, we're seeing a lot of that currently with it's a beautiful thing that we're a trans refuge state. We don't have the infrastructure right now. And so we've got a lot of young folks coming in to Minnesota with really just the trauma that they've experienced and that's resulting in chronic and pervasive mental health issues. And then we're in the situation of are we putting in the cart before the horse? It's like we have to be concurrently working on getting them stably housed so they can actually focus on where they're at. But because of their mental health, finding that stable housing has been a challenge. And so we're you know, part of my job right now in response to this trans refuge bill, which is a beautiful thing for so many folks, is to make it more holistic so that folks who are coming here without the support family also have access in the same ways that those who have resources.
Yeah, and I think definitely, you know, and that's where like relationship, like trust building. Because sometimes, so often I'm with young people who just dissociate in meetings about that, right? Like they at some point, no more information is gonna happen, is gonna come into that brain. And so I think it's really important that I'm, you know, helping simplify some of the information so that they can still try to be making decisions there. I'm like taking notes for them, and also I know that person, right? And so I'm not going to make decisions for them, obviously, but I'm going to advocate for them really strongly. And I'm learning more and more to like be on my toes, right? Because you know, sometimes something is said where like, if that was said to me, no way I would know how to like respond. But I can for someone else as I'm learning. And I'm trying to be able to like call things out right away with providers, right? And just like, yeah, just break it down for them. Like, this is what I'm hearing you say, and this sounds really transphobic. So is that like what you're saying? And sometimes they're like, yeah. So, you know, and so, yeah, totally. I think like huge advocacy and then with that, it's skill building, helping that young person figure out how to do that for themselves too, right? But it's not at some people can at this moment, you know, in a moment of crisis in their life, like they're not able to do some of those things for themselves.
The only thing I'll add is, as a therapist, I am not in the room with clients when they're talking to doctors, but I do make referrals to doctors I know are safe for trans and queer folks. So it's really just having that community knowledge base and being able to make safe referrals.
We have one more question up front.
Just a comment is being a queer youth and having someone that you're able to go to when you're not sure about anything is very, very helpful, and it means everything, especially with meeting this one over here. Being able to create that bond and a sense of brothership, it gives me a moment of having someone that can relate to what I'm going through, even more powerful and understanding of, okay, I can share this with not feeling a sense of judgment towards what I'm going through or not understanding it because someone else hasn't gone through that experience. And so having an adult or just someone who's older than you is definitely very important.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, Myrtle?
Time for a question. So maybe this is like specifically for Ezra, but I work in an org called Queer Space Collective, and we thank you. We love Queer Space at Queer Space. For those of you who don't know, we work with queer youth in like a mentorship model. So hi Daniel. There's like people I know out there. But so like one of the things that we've started trying to navigate, because obviously like Rainbow Health and Reclaim and Family Tree, they what's the word? Send a lot of youth to us. Refer, thank you. I have ADHD. So my question is, how do you approach a situation when you have a youth that is like, for the lack of a better word, like a flight risk, right? That like we have the trans youth, and this is a specific situation that we've had, where they do not have an affirming home, and they have like mentioned possibly leaving that space without like any kind of like follow-up. And of course, like our approach, right, is to like refer them to mental health services or like refer them back to Rainbow Health, right? So my question is like, how do you navigate that relationship with a child that is like a potential houselessness risk due to an unaffirming home? Like, how do you kind of, and I know that's a huge question, but just on that like big picture, how do you approach that situation?
Yeah, so there's a few things. I mean, the first thing is to make sure that they have resources so that like, you know, I have to tell my young people this all the time. I work from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday. You know what I mean? And there are other resources at other times. And you know, the biggest thing is to make sure that they have resources available, that they know what is available to them if they have to leave, if they need a ride somewhere, if they need shelter, because those things exist, and young people just don't know those things. I mean, most people just don't know those things. And then trying to make a plan, like figure out, I mean, it's specific to every person, right? I've helped a young person get emancipated. And so then now they can leave, and we're gonna help them find their own shelter and help them, you know, find independence. Yeah, they're gonna stay in one of our host homes probably, which is great. And he's really young. But I also see people like do that on their own, right? Like I also have young people who like, you know, their parent isn't even in the state. Like I didn't see that whole transition. But maybe they're living with a friend or an auntie, and they've removed themselves, right? And now, so I'm just helping them find independence, helping them find their own safety nets.
Do you attempt to work with the caregivers at all?
A little bit.
I can speak to that a little bit, because that's kind of more my role. But also just to add on to what Ezra was saying too is, you know, ensuring that youth know what supports and services are there. So Youth Services Network,
right?
YSNMN.org is something that you can turn to if you have a young person that's in need and that has basic need. Shelter, drop-in centers, hygiene products, mental health support, food, access, all of that. So identifying with the young person says they need them. Right. And then seeing if there's an actual kind of plan of action with them. And if there isn't, part of Ezra's role then is to kind of like flesh that out a little bit. Host home is an option for some young people. We're always have more youth interested than we have hosts available. That's just the nature of this kind of work. But Ezra does a great job of working with them on the front end until it does become available. And maybe their goals shift over time. Maybe they initially want to be in a host home, and then over time they recognize that's not the case. So we can have conversations with youth. Are you safe where you're at now? If not, is there someone who you trust that you would potentially like to live with? And we can talk to them about backing into the program if that's something they would want to do. We have a no wrong door approach. So if I don't have a host home available, we can definitely talk to the young person about their sphere of support. And if there's a safe person that they feel like they would like to live with, that's a possibility. If they're informally being hosted, maybe they're staying with a friend's family on a couch, they can also back in that way. So they can receive support from us that way. And then once they're in our program, they're considered all these definitions, considered HUD homeless, which means they have access to other supports, long-term housing supports down the line, so they can do an assessment that could steer them towards longer-term housing supports. So it's really like listening to what the young person says they need and want, and trying to act accordingly with the supports we have. I mean, same with even like mental health stuff. If a young person comes to us and we're recognizing that a traditional kind of medical model of therapy doesn't necessarily work for them, we can talk about like, would community support work for you? Turning to queer space and saying maybe the mentoring group or the youth projects would be a good space for them. So it's really listening to what they say and acting accordingly.
Great, that's extremely helpful.
Yes.
This is not so much wanting a lot of feedback or comment, just any insight, because these things maybe already exist, I don't know. But you're talking about the lack of BIPOC providers and such to be able to serve the community. And it sounds like with the waiting lists, that just a lack of enough providers in general. And I'm wondering if there have ever been any efforts to provide outreach and bringing about your jobs, your professions and careers as possible career employment opportunities to young people reaching like into the high school as saying, you know, these are possibilities, reaching out as far as a career track to get somebody into the door so that we can grow from the bottom up, more providers that would meet the need. And then also reaching out if there are any workshops or something that could be provided from some of the services from within to reach out to providers specifically to do training, you know, for those who lack the understanding of the community, so that that it's just providers in general. So you know, if there are any workshops, etc., for like aiming toward physicians or other providers, so that they have an understanding maybe where they could gain the CEU specifically toward, you know, knowing how to interact in language and understanding unconscious bias and such, that they could gain CEUs or such. So I'm thinking how do we grow our, you know, the community? How do we grow expanding you know, people to help have access to BIPOC providers within your realm? And how do we reach out to other providers like within the medical community, so that they can become more fluent in understanding how to work with our young people?
Big question.
They think there are things out there already.
Yeah. Well, so internally, something that we do is any youth that is going to share their expertise or lived experience gets paid for their time and effort. So if they're doing any kind of work with us, so all of ConneQT has been designed through a youth lens, meaning that we have collaborated with young folks on the design of the program from the very beginning, and then as we adapt and shape and shift things, it's really coming from what youth are telling us through surveys and conversations and panels and study groups and listening sessions. And they're all paid for all of that time. So then there have been youth who have really moved from ConneQT. So like part of our work around advocacy, you know, having conversations with young people about that and helping young people kind of identify possibilities and opportunities to be more involved in the advocacy aspects of this world. So there are a lot of young people that are on youth boards, both locally and nationally, and speak at conferences and panel discussions as well. And, you know, talking to a wide variety of folks, so maybe educators, maybe service providers, maybe those who are like, you know, funding stakeholders, that kind of thing. So we do try, again, it's all youth determined and driven. So some youth are like not interested in that at all. And some youth are like really wanting to be involved in that world as much as possible. I can't really speak to the advanced, like, you know, getting credits for participating in those kinds of things. I don't know if that's really kind of, it's not really an academic approach, more advocacy approach.
You brought me up to an idea. So you work with with youth up to 24 years old, are you helping them to find education jobs too?
Yes, all of the goal planning is youth determined and driven, so we don't prescribe goals to young people. They get to tell us what they'd like to work on, and then we work, okay, so this is education as a goal, so what are the steps we need to take in order to get there? Or you want long-term employment, stable housing, what are the steps we need to take to get there? So typically, even though we don't prescribe goals, there are some similar themes: education, employment, long-term housing, that kind of thing, focusing on mental health, those kinds of things. So yeah, we do work with young folks on that, and then Avenues has a education and employment specialist as well, who can work really specifically on those goals.
And choosing, I assume, choosing employers who are LGBT friendly, right?
Definitely try to ensure that they're feeling affirmed in their employment.
Yeah, and I will say too, though, that like, you know, something I think about, like, you know, class privilege, right? If I have parents who have a bedroom for me and it's a safe space for me, if I'm going through something as a young person, I can go live with them and work a part-time job. And you know, like that is something that a lot of people experience. And if I don't have those supports and I'm going through something, I'm gonna be homeless, right? And so like something too is if somebody doesn't have like education and career on their goal, I think that's amazing, and I really hope that I can help to find them housing for a while so that they don't have to do that, because we need time to heal, right? And we need time to just focus on ourselves. And if that person doesn't need to be grinding, like I love that. I want them to have a safe space to rest and to have time to think about really what those other goals can be someday. But you know, sometimes they know that they do need those things, and it's on their goals. So
such a good acknowledgement. I'm caught up in the capitalist slog. Yeah.
That's a good phrase.
resting is not available to the poor, unfortunately.
Yep. You know.
Yeah.
So maybe for Ezra, but really the whole panel. You had mentioned a case involving emancipation. I'm a legal aid attorney in a healthcare legal partnership in the city, so I have providers come to me sometimes with young folks who talk to me about emancipation. And my understanding in Minnesota, there's not a clear cause of action. So I wondered if you'd be able to discuss maybe the interplay between being a trans refuge state and the concept of emancipation when there's not a clear pathway, and the need, and especially in families where you don't have that affirming, care, and that in and of itself is a curious.
Yeah, so Emancipation Minnesota is really gray. Yeah, there's no like application or anything. So basically, an attorney has to know like what kind of document to write up, and they just do that. And then, yeah, and then with a notary, the parent and the young person have to sign it, and it just says that this, yeah, it just is a declaration of emancipation. The court has to honor that, and but a lot of agencies don't have to. So that's why it's great, is that like a young person can have this and like be in the hospital, and that specific hospital can say, we don't want to honor this. You have to contact your guardian before we release you. But they also can honor it. So it's like, right, it's kind of convoluted. So like we have this young person who's gonna be in host home. Yes, they're emancipated, and also we are gonna also see if their parent would sign a delegation of parental authority, because that will just cover our bases. If he's ever in a position where he's not going to get, someone's not going to honor that, then his host parent can come through too and sign something. So it's really great most of the time, and also we're going to see how it plays out, because this is actually my first young person who I've had this with.
Yeah, so any minor we have in our program will have a delegation of parental authority form filled out, and so it does allow hosts to provide some support around systems like education or healthcare. But it is kind of a case by case when it comes to emancipation, so we're just gonna lean into it and see, how we can advocate best for this young person when we do run up against systems that don't want to honor it.
Can I say one more thing too? Is that like if emancipation is like too convoluted and challenging to get to, you also can get a delegation of parental authority form, and it doesn't have to be with an organization. Like that young person, if they have someone else they want to stay with, or an auntie or whoever, like they can that's also a legal document that is a good way to get them, you know, some steps removed from their guardian.
I just had a question because this is pretty new. So the parent or guardian has to sign?
Sure. That's the biggest barrier I see.
Yeah.
But if you have a lack of consent, basically in Minnesota, my understanding, sure, emancipation is the thing if you have parental consent, which
Right.
obviously that
Yeah.
you got a problem with.
Wow.
That's one other.
Anyway.
There's one other way. The other way to be emancipated is if you have been kicked out or run away and your guardian has not contacted you, then you can be considered emancipated, and then they don't need to sign that.
Sorry, just a comment is, also, hi, I'm Tina, I'm one of the therapists in the B2B/adolescent and emerging adult program. So I was actually working at YouthLink before this position, and I think I had to do a lot of research on the minor consent and stuff, but aren't there like specific services for folks who maybe not legally considered like emancipated, but like that minors like have like access to? I think like there was like certain types of health treatment, like maybe kind of the health stuff. I know when I was working with some folks who were under 18, but like maybe over 60 and were providing for themselves or had children, and they were considered to be like to be their own person to like be able to consent to certain services like that.
I think it would be 16.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, so that does, yeah, so if you have a minor who's 16, they can advocate for themselves to get the mental health support that they need, and they don't need parental consent for that. I think we have like 4 more minutes left. Do you have another question?
Yeah, I have.
Sorry.
There was something I want to comment on that was said a few minutes ago, if that's okay. There was something that had come up about like, are there ways that we're recruiting people from marginalized backgrounds to be in the therapeutic field? Are there things that we're doing for continuing education and whatnot? Well, first, I'm Daniel, I'm a music therapist in town. And this stuff is going on across healthcare, like all the different therapeutic fields, all the different things about how do we address race? How do we have people recruited within our field to be supporting folks, et cetera? And this is a really great example of like structural racism that, you know, yeah, we can recruit some folks of color from communities to be part of university programs, but are the university programs ready to support kids, or not kids, young people who aren't from the usual cis white woman background that they're used to as a social work program or whatever it may be, which is the same in music therapy. You know, and then we get into employment, where in employment, you know, I think a lot of us have experienced in healthcare spaces, our colleagues of color, our colleagues who are queer, not lasting as long because they're not supported, because there are these little microaggressive things going on, you know, and then positions of leadership, positions of teaching, things like that. So it's a multi-level thing that, you know, one thing alone won't do it. And so I just want to like name that into it just because we're kind of talking about race and whatnot. And that's one of the big challenges, is that it's all the things at once. And it can't just be one thing, or else, you know, for instance, recruiting young people, going back to that example. So they get into the program, they get 2 years in, they're not being supported, things are going really badly, they quit, now they got a couple $1,000s in debt. So they're even worse off than, you know, so it's just wanted to kind of name that aspect of it, that these things do exist, but it's kind of got to be a lot of things at once to really.
Thank you for naming that.
With the lack of kids being able to get scholarships, grants, all of that really decreases their ability to even get into a program without walking out with $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 in student loan debt, and then they make $10 an hour and drink. Yeah. Great.
Yeah. If there are no other questions in the crowd, I have one more to finish us up. We talked a lot about like self-empowerment for trans young people or queer young people. But I guess what could be done more at the community level to support the things that y'all are doing that help support trans and queer young?
I have so many ideas.
So with queer and trans youth experiencing housing instability and homelessness in particular, so we know that research shows that there's an overrepresentation of queer and trans youth experiencing housing instability and homelessness, and there's a dearth of culturally responsive supports out there. I think we're one of 2 housing programs that's just focus in on LGBTQI youth in the Twin Cities.
Yes,
There's one in Duluth, I think, right?
yes.
We just need more support. And so if you believe in the mission and the values program that we just talked about, share with folks who you think may be interested in opening their home. This is a program of, that looks through the lens of solidarity. It's one of like us and us, and we need to show up for one another. Our systems are corrosive and put so many barriers in front of QT BIPOC young folks, and we need to do more to step up and show our solidarity. So if you know anyone who's interested, word of mouth matters and travels. So please share about that as much as possible. Yeah, I'll pass it on to you.
I know we're basically at time, but one of the things that I would love to see more of are ways for older folks to get educated on queer and trans issues. I am continually astounded by how many people's parents are turning away because of purported faith and beliefs that their child is like somehow sinful and all this stuff that is just like not true. And so I would love to see more churches and other faith organizations educating older folks, but all people about like who we are and acceptance and just, I don't know, I don't know what it's gonna take, but I am encouraged by what I'm seeing from young people, and I think we're all very ready for those ripple effects to continue moving throughout our communities.
Yeah, we need hosts. Yeah, I think just like, correct people when people are misgendered, that's a huge thing, right? Like we know that like minimizes suicide risk by like 50%, right? Like you don't need permission to do that. And yeah, just like speaking up, being an advocate. I think that's huge. I think like creating spaces where trans people feel welcome. Even like, there's a lot of queer folks in this room, like, even there are so many queer spaces where like trans people don't want to go to actually. And so, just being like aware of that and talking to trans people about like what would make your space better. I think those are huge. And then, if you are in like networks of mutual aid, making sure that those are available to trans folks, making sure that they know about them, making sure that they can access them. Because some of those spaces are amazing and also like inaccessible to you if you're not like a punk or like, I don't know. Right, so like, just like making sure that the people know about those things, that they're available to all folks. Yeah. That's what I'd say.
I think the last thing that came to mind for me is as folks work within organizations and community organizing, cross movement organizing.
Yes.
Let's break down those silos, let's work together. We all know it's an island, we can't do this alone, we need to do this in concert with one another. And in a really informed and actionable way of forming solidarity.
What a way to end it. Thank you so much. Go on, listen, support, and advocate for the trans people here and around you and in your life. The next session will be in this room anyway. Will be supporting trans and non-binary youth in Minnesota, a panel with transforming families. So continuing this conversation of how to support the young trans people around us in Minnesota.
I had stay for an hour. Adults program.
Yeah, check out our table. Very similar.
That was.
I know.